I couldn't watch you belong to the world anymore. You are mine forever.
Prisca learned early that the world rarely offers mercy to girls born into nothing. In the narrow streets where she grew up, dreams were fragile things spoken softly, then forgotten when survival demanded louder attention. Hunger taught lessons faster than books, and disappointment arrived more faithfully than hope. Her childhood home was small, but the weight it carried was enormous. Every cracked wall told a story of endurance. Every silent night whispered of sacrifices made without applause. Prisca watched adults surrender their ambitions one by one, trading tomorrow for today simply to get by. She promised herself she would not disappear the same way. While other children chased laughter through the dust-filled air, Prisca sat with borrowed books balanced on her knees. She studied beneath flickering lights, memorizing possibilities the world never intended for her. When others complained about their circumstances, she planned her escape quietly, patiently, fiercely. Failure visited her often. Doors closed, hands pulled away, promises dissolved like smoke. But each setback sharpened her resolve. Every tear she wiped in secret hardened into determination. Pain did not break her, it trained her. Years passed, and the girl who once stood at the edges of opportunity stepped boldly into the center of it. Prisca rose through grit and vision, transforming hardship into an empire built on discipline and foresight. Her name soon commanded silence in boardrooms and admiration in headlines. Cameras loved her confidence. Investors trusted her instincts. The world applauded her success without ever asking what it cost. Beneath the tailored suits and carefully practiced smiles, however, lived a woman who remembered everything. She remembered hunger. She remembered betrayal. She remembered the people who promised to stay and didn't. Wealth protected her body, but her heart remained guarded by scars no luxury could erase. Success, she believed, had sealed her past behind iron doors. That the girl she once was could no longer reach her. That the memories had finally been left behind. She was wrong. The past does not stay buried forever. It waits, and soon, it would return uninvited, undeniable, and determined to be seen. Before wealth reshaped Prisca's world, before ambition hardened her voice and sharpened her gaze, there was Seung-Hun. He was the first person to truly see her not as a girl defined by lack, but as someone meant for more. In the days when life was simple and unforgiving, they were inseparable souls, two children holding on to each other while the world demanded maturity long before innocence had time to fade. Seung-Hun grew up learning silence. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he acted. His gentleness was not weakness but restraint, a carefulness shaped by responsibility and loss. He carried brilliance in his mind and burdens in his heart, responsibilities too heavy for shoulders still growing. Prisca was different. She burned brightly, fiercely. Where she dreamed aloud, he guarded those dreams. Where she stumbled, he steadied her without asking for gratitude. He followed her like a promise he never intended to break, always a step behind, always close enough to catch her when she fell. They shared stolen laughter, whispered hopes, and quiet moments that felt eternal. In Seung-Hun's presence, Prisca believed the future could be kind. In Prisca's belief, Seung-Hun found purpose. But life has little patience for young dreams. Circumstances tightened around them like a closing fist. Choices were forced, paths divided. Survival demanded sacrifice, and love was not strong enough to argue with necessity. The day Prisca left, words crowded Seung-Hun's chest confessions he never learned how to release. Pride kept his mouth closed. Fear told him that if he spoke, he might lose her forever. So he watched her walk away, carrying everything she hoped to become, while he stayed behind with everything he never said. Prisca chased survival, unaware of the quiet grief she left behind. Seung-Hun remained, holding on to memories that refused to fade. Time moved forward without mercy. Seasons changed. Faces aged. The world moved on as if nothing had been broken. But the heart does not obey time. Years later, long after childhood had turned into history, Seung-Hun still carried Prisca within him, not as she was, but as she had been. The girl who dreamed beyond her circumstances. The girl who trusted him without question. Some bonds are not severed by distance. Some stories pause, but never end. And though neither of them knew it yet, fate had not finished with them. The ballroom shimmered beneath cascading chandeliers, washed in gold and crystal that reflected power, wealth, and carefully curated perfection. As Prisca stepped inside, the room seemed to inhale. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Cameras lifted instinctively, capturing the arrival of a woman who had mastered both presence and silence. Applause followed her like a crown she never asked for but had earned all the same. Prisca moved with practiced grace, her expression calm, composed, untouchable. Every step echoed years of discipline and control. To the world, her confidence was made visible by a woman who had conquered odds and rewritten her destiny. Then she felt it, a shift in the air, a tightening in her chest. It was subtle but undeniable, the kind of pull that defies logic and reason. Her smile faltered for the briefest second as her instincts, those she had learned never to ignore, guided her gaze across the room. That was when she saw him. Seung-Hun stood near the far end of the ballroom, half-shadowed by towering columns, as if he did not fully belong to the world she now occupied. He was older, broader, his features sharpened by time and restraint. The boy she once knew was gone, replaced by a man whose stillness held quiet storms. His eyes met hers. In that instant, years collapsed into seconds. The noise of the ballroom faded into a distant hum. Prisca no longer heard the music or the murmured admiration surrounding her. All she could see was Seung-Hun, unchanged and yet entirely different. His gaze was steady, intense, carrying regret, longing, and something dangerously close to accusation. Memories surged uninvited. Laughter beneath open skies. Promises never spoken aloud. A goodbye that had never truly been said. Seung-Hun felt it too. He had prepared himself for this moment, or so he thought. But no amount of discipline could have braced him for the sight of Prisca standing radiant and powerful. A living reminder of everything he had lost and everything he still wanted. She was no longer the girl who ran beside him barefoot, yet she carried the same fire in her eyes. The distance between them felt charged, heavy with words trapped behind years of silence. Prisca's heart betrayed her composure. She had believed success had erased him, buried him beneath layers of achievement and guarded ambition. But standing there, wrapped in silk and applause, she understood the truth. She had not escaped him. She had only delayed this moment. And as fate tightened its grip, Prisca knew without question that the past had finally caught up with her, and it had come wearing Seung-Hun's face. Their reunion was anything but warm. When they finally stood face to face, the air between Prisca and Seung-Hun felt brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Polite smiles were exchanged for the sake of watching eyes, but once they moved away from the crowd, the masks fell. "You look successful," Seung-Hun said, his voice calm, though his jaw tightened as if holding back more than words. Prisca's lips curved into a practiced smile. "And you look like someone who stayed behind." The accusation was subtle, almost gentle, but it landed with precision. Questions followed, sharp-edged and carefully phrased. Each one disguised an old wound, each answer reopening scars neither had allowed to heal. Prisca spoke of silence, of unanswered letters, of nights she waited for a sign that never came. Seung-Hun spoke of pride, of watching her leave without looking back, of believing he no longer had the right to follow. Neither admitted the truth, that they had both been afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of being too late, afraid that love alone would not be enough to survive the world they came from. As they spoke, Seung-Hun's gaze drifted past Prisca toward the men who approached her with admiration thinly veiled as interest. Powerful men in tailored suits, offering smiles and futures with casual confidence. Men who belonged to her world now. A familiar ache tightened in his chest. Jealousy, sharp and unwelcome, crept through him as he watched them stand where he once had beside her, close enough to matter. He remembered the days when he was the one who steadied her, the one she trusted without hesitation. Now he was just another shadow from a past she seemed determined to outgrow. "You've changed," he said quietly. So have you? Prisca replied. Her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of pain. The tension thickened, emotions colliding without restraint. Years of restraint cracked beneath the weight of unspoken longing and resentment. Seung-Hun felt it then, that dangerous pull between holding on and letting go. And when the ache became unbearable, when jealousy drowned reason, when fear masqueraded as courage, he did the unthinkable. It happened in a heartbeat. One moment, Seung-Hun was standing inches away from Prisca, his chest tight with words he had buried for years. The next, restraint shattered. He reached for her, not gently, not cautiously, but with the desperation of someone who had waited too long and feared he might never get another chance. His hand closed around her wrist. He pulled her toward him, and then he kissed her. The kiss was raw, unpolished, and reckless, driven by jealousy, longing, and the pain of watching her slip further into a world where he no longer belonged. It was not planned. It was not graceful. It was a collision of past and present, of everything he never said crashing into a single moment. The world seemed to pause. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Conversations fell silent. Music faltered. Time stretched thin as eyes widened and cameras snapped, capturing what no one expected and everyone would remember. Prisca froze, not because she wanted it but because something ancient stirred within her. For a fleeting second, she remembered the warmth of safety, the simplicity of being known without explanation. She remembered what it felt like to belong to someone before power complicated love, before success demanded distance and control. Then reality returned. She pulled away, her breath unsteady, her heart racing with emotions she refused to name. The room was no longer a celebration. It was a courtroom. Judgment lingered in every stare. The cameras had seen everything. By morning, the kiss would become headlines. By nightfall, it would ignite rumors, fracture alliances, and invite scrutiny from those waiting for Prisca to falter. Enemies would sense weakness. Opportunists would smell blood. And Seung-Hun knew it too. As he met Prisca's stunned gaze, regret and fear flooded his chest. In trying to hold on, he may have set her world on fire. That single kiss did more than cross a line. Changed everything. Prisca walked away that night with her head held high. Her posture was flawless, her expression unreadable, her steps measured and elegant just as the world expected of her. Cameras followed until the doors closed behind her, sealing the noise and judgment outside. Only then did her composure begin to crack. Inside the quiet of her car, silence pressed against her chest. Her heart was in turmoil. She replayed the moment again and again, the sudden pull, the kiss, the way her body had frozen as memory and instinct collided. It frightened her how quickly the past had surfaced, how easily one touch had shaken the walls she had built so carefully around herself. She questioned everything: the kiss, the emotions it awakened, the weakness she never believed she still carried. For years, Prisca had trained herself to feel nothing that could not be controlled. Love had been filed away as a luxury she could not afford. Yet in that single, reckless moment, something she thought long buried had stirred soft, familiar, dangerous. She hated that part of herself. Across the city, Seung-Hun sat alone in the dim quiet of his apartment, staring at nothing. His hand still tingled where it had touched her wrist. His chest felt tight with regret and some worse relief. He knew he had crossed a line. He had violated her boundaries, her world, her carefully maintained control. And yet, for the first time in his life, he had acted instead of remaining silent. He had chosen movement over restraint, truth over fear. The consequences terrified him. He imagined the headlines, the backlash, the damage to her reputation, to everything she had built. Guilt pressed heavily on his conscience, threatening to crush the brief satisfaction of having finally expressed what his heart had carried for years. Neither of them slept. Prisca lay awake in unfamiliar vulnerability, staring into darkness she could not command. Seung-Hun paced his small living room, replaying every second, every choice, every unspoken apology. Both wondered the same thing. Had that moment been a mistake born of unresolved pain? Or had fate demanded their attention after years of silence? The night offered no answers, only the certainty that nothing between them would ever be the same again. The media storm arrived with ruthless speed. By morning, Prisca's name dominated headlines, twisted into speculation and scandal. Commentators dissected a single moment as if it defined her entire existence. Share prices wavered. Board members demanded explanations. Trust so carefully earned began to feel fragile. Yet the true danger did not come from cameras. It came from what Prisca uncovered next. Behind closed doors and encrypted files, unsettling truths surfaced. Anonymous warnings, quiet financial irregularities, a pattern of moves designed not to steal her empire outright but to weaken it from within. Someone had been watching her success, waiting patiently for a moment of instability. And then she saw his name, Seung-Hun, not in accusation but in protection. His return had not been a coincidence. Long before the gala, he had been tracing threats, intercepting information, redirecting damage before it reached her. While the world believed he had come back out of nostalgia or unfinished business, Seung-Hun had been standing in the shadows, guarding what she never knew was under attack. Understanding struck Prisca like cold water. The jealousy she had seen in his eyes, the sharp words, the reckless kiss had masked something deeper. Fear. Fear of losing her all over again. Fear of failing her the way he believed he had before. Her anger softened into confusion. She remembered the boy who used to walk her home, who shielded her from storms with nothing but his presence. Had he truly never stopped protecting her? Had she been wrong to assume he only represented a past she had outgrown? Still, doubt lingered. Protection and control are dangerously close cousins. And Prisca had built her life on independence, on never needing to be saved. Trusting Seung-Hun now meant risking everything she had learned to defend. Yet as she pieced together the evidence, one truth refused to be ignored. If Seung-Hun had wanted to harm her, he would have done nothing at all. Instead, he stood between her and destruction, silent, imperfect, and terrified of failing her again. For the first time since the kiss, Prisca allowed herself to wonder if the boy who once loved her had never truly left. He had only been waiting for the moment she would need him most. Working together was not a choice, it was a necessity. Threats against Prisca's empire demanded strategy, discretion, and absolute trust. Reluctantly at first, she allowed Seung-Hun into her inner circle, setting clear boundaries even as uncertainty lingered between them. They met behind closed doors, away from cameras and judgment, where titles meant nothing and the past had room to breathe. At the beginning, silence dominated the room. Conversations were carefully measured. Every word carried weight. But as nights stretched longer and the work grew heavier, something shifted. Arguments softened into discussions. Discussions faded into stories. Late-night conversations replaced bitterness. They spoke of dreams once whispered beneath open skies, of paths that had led them in different directions, of choices made in fear and hope. Seung-Hun admitted the nights he had spent wondering who Prisca had become. Prisca confessed how often she had missed the safety of being understood without explanation. Laughter returned unexpectedly and gently, surprised them both. In those quiet hours, Prisca began to see past Seung-Hun's jealousy and impulsiveness. She saw the man who carried responsibility like a second skin, the one who loved deeply but spoke carefully, the boy who had never stopped worrying about her safety. And Seung-Hun, in turn, saw beyond the power and polish. He saw the woman who still questioned herself in silence, the girl who had survived by becoming strong, the heart that longed to rest but never dared to. Slowly, walls began to fall, not with grand gestures or promises, but with honesty, with shared exhaustion, with trust rebuilt brick by brick. What returned between them was not the innocence of childhood, but something far stronger. A connection earned through pain, growth, and truth. For the first time in years, Prisca allowed herself to believe that trust did not have to mean weakness. And Seung-Hun allowed himself to hope that love, patience, and imperfection might still have a place in her future. Peace, Prisca learned, was often the calm before the storm. Just as trust began to settle between her and Seung-Hun, Danger struck with ruthless precision. A betrayal surfaced from within her inner circle, someone she had trusted with access, with silence, with power. Financial records were manipulated. Security systems compromised. What began as whispers escalated into a threat not just to her empire, but to her life. The world she had built so carefully began to shake. Meetings turned frantic. Allies questioned loyalties. Fear crept into the corners of boardrooms once ruled by confidence. In the chaos, Prisca felt the familiar urge to retreat behind control to handle everything alone, as she always had. But this time, Seung-Hun did not step aside. He stood firm. While others hesitated, he moved. He anticipated danger before it reached her, placing himself between Prisca and harm without hesitation. He risked exposure, reputation, even his own safety to protect her, not as a savior seeking gratitude, but as someone who understood the cost of losing her. Watching him, Prisca's certainty began to crumble. For the first time, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, not weak, but open. She trusted him with decisions she would have once guarded fiercely. She listened. She leaned in. And when the moment demanded a choice between isolation and connection, she chose him. It was not dramatic. It was deliberate. In the heat of betrayal and fear, Prisca realized something profound. Love was not about possession or control. It was not about who stood beside her when everything was easy. Love was about courage. The courage to trust. The courage to share the weight. The courage to risk being hurt again. And as the fire around them raged, Prisca knew without doubt that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. Time, as it always does, softened the edges of scandal. The world moved on. New headlines replaced old ones, attention shifted, and the kiss that once shook Prisca's empire faded into memory. But Prisca herself did not return to who she once was. Something within her had changed, quietly and permanently. She learned that strength did not demand hardness. For years, she had believed survival required armor, distance, control, solitude. Now she understood that strength could coexist with softness, that opening her heart did not weaken her authority but deepened it. Success, she realized, carried more meaning when it was shared with someone who knew the cost behind it. Prisca faced her past honestly, without shame or avoidance. The memories she once locked away became lessons rather than wounds. What had once felt like a prison transformed into a bridge connecting the girl she had been to the woman she had become. And Seung-Hun. He no longer stood behind her, nor did he exist in her shadow. He walked beside her, not as a reminder of who she used to be, but as a partner who respected who she was now. He built his own purpose, his own voice, no longer defined by regret or restraint. Where once jealousy had lived, confidence grew. Where fear had lingered, trust took root. Together, they chose something rare. Not a love born of desperation or nostalgia, but one rebuilt on truth. They spoke openly. They disagreed honestly. They protected each other without possession and supported one another without losing themselves. Theirs was not a perfect love. It was better. It was intentional. It was courageous. It was real. And in choosing each other, Prisca and Seung-Hun built something far sweeter than wealth. A future shaped by understanding, resilience, and a love reborn not from jealousy, but from truth.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Also click on the notification bell, so that you will get notified whenever a new story comes up. You can also go ahead to tell me the country you are watching from, so that I can make a story for you.